This is Matt Coyne, host of The Cheap Seats. Thank you for listening to the following broadcast here on Public House Media.
Hey, it's Baxter Colburn here from Public House Media. Did you know that we just added a store here at Public House Media? No, I'm not talking about a grocery store where you can go buy apples or bananas or peanut butter, which are all fantastic, especially when peanut butter's on all of those. Anyway, we've added a store here at Public House Media so you can not only come and represent your favorite podcast network, but also represent your favorite shows as well, too. Just go over to thephmedia.com and look in the top right corner where you'll see the button that says Store. Click on that and you can search through all of our great products. Or if you go to our Facebook page, Public House Media, you can see on the left-hand side a tab that says Store. All of our products are listed there as well too. It's the new Public House Media store. You don't want to miss it. It is fantastic. Buy some of that great swag to support your favorite shows and to support Public House Media. Check it out today.
This is Danny Domer, host of podcast The Star Wars Story, here on Public House Media. Thanks for listening to the following broadcast on Public House Media. Once you're done with this episode, I hope you come check out my show, Podcast The Star Wars Story, where we talk about Star Wars and everything there is to know about Star Wars. A new show comes out every other week, also known as bi-monthly for you calendar folk. Don't forget to subscribe on iTunes so you never miss an episode of Podcast, The Star Wars Story. Thanks again for checking out the following broadcast on Public House Media.
The latest headlines.
The Houston Astros, the defending World Series champions, got better, adding Garrett Cole.
The insightful interviews.
Rick Saratella, NFL Draft Bible. With how much emphasis is put on the position, yet how many over the last couple of years we've had questions. Why do we put such an emphasis on drafting a quarterback number one overall?
The bottom line is there's not enough good quarterbacks to go around. And I think with the new CBA, it's really a low-risk gamble now. If you look at the playoff teams, the common denominator, good quarterback play.
The hottest takes.
I think the guy to blame is the one guy who hasn't left yet. I think Russell Westbrook is one of the bigger problems in Oklahoma City.
Can all be found on Press Row. Broadcasting is part of the Public House Media Network. Here's your host.
It doesn't matter what your name is.
Christian Heimel.
What's up, everybody? Welcome on Press Row. Once again, Christian Heimel here with you, broadcasting as part of the Public House Media Network. Thank you so much for being a part of the show here on this Thursday, May 31st, 2018, last day of the month of May. We hit June tomorrow, and we hit the NBA Finals tonight. Brandon Robinson, Scoop B Radio, will join us in a few minutes to help break that one down in what is the fourth consecutive year in which we are seeing the Golden State Warriors and the Cleveland Cavaliers. We'll also get into what this series means for both teams, really for the legacy of LeBron James, what this playoff run does for him, what this does for the NBA, and we're going to touch on if this is good for basketball to have the same exact matchup 4 years in a row. It's been insane to think that we almost kind of knew it when Kevin Durant signed with the Warriors, that this was going to be how it was going to happen. It was going to be multiple years of the Warriors being there. As long as LeBron is around, it's clearly going to be the Cavs as a talented team as well. But this is one of those things where you almost wonder just how good this can be for basketball. But at the same time, we've seen this before. With the Lakers and Kobe Bryant, Michael Jordan and the Bulls, the Celtics in the 60s and 70s, the Lakers in the 80s, the bad boy Pistons. We've seen this before where one or two teams kind of dominate and you almost kind of expect them to always meet. It's just one of those things that who knows if it's good for what is happening in the NBA and is maybe the social media aspect of it. Is that maybe part of the reason why there's this perception that it's bad for basketball, because numbers say otherwise. Numbers say that this is a good thing for basketball. Actually, if you look at it, there was an impressive article a couple weeks ago by Lee Steinberg in Forbes magazine, actually last week, a week ago. Would this be good, before this was even official, would this be a good or bad thing for the NBA. And from a rating standpoint, this is a great thing for the NBA. The first time these two teams met, 2014-2015, 19.9 million viewers over the course of that series. The last 2 years, even more viewers. Think about this. In 2013-14, that San Antonio Spurs-Miami Heat final before LeBron made it back to Cleveland, 15.4 million viewers. The very next year, the first Warriors-Cavaliers matchup had 4.5 million more people watching. Game 5 last year, highest rating for a Game 5 in the NBA Finals since 1998. Since 98. Talking 19 years. Last year's Game 5, highest rating of a Game 5 in 19 years. Regular season, this year, ABC, ESPN, TNT, NBA TV. Across the board, NBA viewership up 8%, according to Nielsen. Playoff matchups this year, 17%. So I don't know if this is bad for the NBA. You can't say that it is. You really can't. I mean, it's a good thing. I think about it this way. What do we always say about baseball? Baseball is better when the New York Yankees and the Boston Red Sox are competing. It's better that way. Football is better when the Dallas Cowboys are good. Think about it. As much as this past Super Bowl, how many of you watched to see if the Patriots would lose? You know, you may not like the Patriots, but you watched. How many of you are watching these NBA Finals? Whether you say you're going to or not, you're going to watch it. Stop lying to yourself. You're watching to see one of these teams lose. You're either watching to see LeBron lose or you're watching because you're tired of the Warriors. It's not the predictability factor of the NBA that bothers us. It's the fact that we get tired of the comparison. I don't think it's so much as we're tired of LeBron against the Warriors. We're tired of the predictability of it. We're tired of the super team in Golden State, and we're tired of LeBron. I think what it is we're tired of having the argument of LeBron versus Jordan. We're tired of having that. And as long as LeBron is still competing for titles, we're going to have that comparison. We're going to. So I don't know if people are going to be upset. You're going to be upset one way or the other. If LeBron wins another one, it helps in the argument that he's the greatest of all time. If LeBron loses another one, you're going to be upset that the super team in Golden State, could they really do it without Steph Curry, without Kevin Durant? You're going to have those arguments. But this has been an actually really incredible and impressive NBA playoffs so far. I've actually really enjoyed this. It's been a lot of fun, and I don't usually watch the NBA playoffs that much, but you look at what these series did. You look at the fact that you had so many Game 7s. You had Warriors, you had obviously Pacers, Cavs in the first round. You had the Celtics going to Game 7 against Milwaukee. Celtics, Cavs in the Eastern Conference Finals. You have both conference finals going to Game 7. I mean, the East, which used to be the laughingstock, was really competitive this year. Really competitive and really fun. So I think the NBA is in a good space right now, even though this is one of the biggest, according to Vegas, mismatches of all time. Largest point spread tonight. Largest point spread in a finals game since 1991. Golden State's favored by 12 tonight. That's the most since 2001 when the Lakers were a 12-point favorite over Philadelphia. Tied for the largest since 1991. They're saying this could be one of the biggest upsets of all time if LeBron James is able to drag this Cavaliers team to where he hopes to take them, and that is another NBA championship. We'll get into all that with Brandon Robinson, Scoop B Radio, coming up in just a little bit. But more news in the NBA, and this is insane. This is, with social media in the era that we live in, it's hard to find things that shock people and make you kind of go, what and how? But Brian Colangelo, the 76ers president, if you haven't heard about it by now, this came out yesterday. Really, it came out 2 days ago on The Ringer. Ben Dietrich of The Ringer getting this and discussing it. And then yesterday, the Sixers announcing they were doing an independent investigation of their own. But The Ringer apparently in February got a tip that Colangelo, the president of basketball operations, was secretly operating 5 different Twitter accounts and using them to criticize some of his own players, Joel Embiid, Jahlil Okafor, Nerlens Noel, question the decisions of his own coaching staff, Brett Brown, question the decisions and criticize Sam Hinkie, the former Sixers GM, Toronto Raptors president Masai Ujiri, who replaced Colangelo, by the way, in Toronto, basically disclose private information about the health of Jahlil Okafor, Joel Embiid, and Markelle Fultz, and then try to defend himself, or defend Colangelo, these Twitter accounts, in the trade for Markelle Fultz, and basically telegraph what he was going to do. And if this is true, this is just weird that there are 5 different accounts being operated by the president of a NBA franchise that he's using to publicly disclose private information about his players' health. Number 1, bad move. 2, professional business dealings as the president of basketball operations. Criticize his own players and own coaching staff, and basically knock down the guy who helped start everything in Philadelphia, Sam Hinkie, the process, and criticize his replacement in Toronto. And it's doing so with a name like Colangelo in the NBA. His father, Jerry Colangelo, is a legend. And if you just read it, I mean, at first thing, you're kind of sitting there, if you just read the headline, you're kind of going, there's no way. No. And if you just look at it on face value and you find these Twitter accounts and you go and look at them, you're kind of sitting there going, okay, these are just trolls, these are just people, keyboard warriors, whatever you want to call them. But there are too many coincidences in here for it not to be true. There are way too many. It's unbelievable. The fact that 4 of those accounts follow a gentleman, which apparently is Warren Legary, who is the founder of the Vegas Summer League, and an agent who used to represent Colangelo. All 5 of them at one point following that account. One of the accounts, the one that's probably the most notable one, known as Eric Jr., following a number of accounts related to the University of Chicago men's basketball team, where Brian Colangelo's son is a student and a player on their basketball team. A couple of those accounts following a former basketball coach of his son from high school in Canada. A number of his son's teammates, Colangelo's teammates at the University of Chicago. It's just too weird to be able to really kind of sit there and just pass off as who knows, as purely circumstantial or coincidental. It's kind of hard to do that. At the same time, there are posts about, let's see here, the one that's really interesting to me. This is the one that is just kind of blows my mind. One of them actually goes after Gabrielle Union, which was hilarious to me. This is so funny. You've got one, February 2017, Gabrielle Union on Twitter mentioned that Brady did not attend the White House when Barack Obama was president, and this Twitter account went, "I sat next to you and D. Wade at Beijing Olympics, saw you both being rude, nasty to a little kid fan, had to eat your pizza, you showed no respect to this little kid, who are you to stand on high grounds, never looked at DW the same after that." According to the according to a couple of different books, and a couple of different bits of research that were done, Brian Colangelo was in Beijing at the time. So, I mean, is it possible? Jerry Colangelo was the managing director of the U.S. men's basketball team when they were in Beijing in 2008. It's possible that it could be Jerry Colangelo. It could be Colangelo's son, Mattia. But there's just part of this that even says Brian Colangelo was mentioned in a book, Return of the Gold by Dan Bickley, saying that he was associated with Team USA at the 2008 Olympics in Beijing. That coincidence, along with one about him, let's see here, February 10, 2017, one of the Twitter accounts saying, "I hope the Sevens," meaning the Delaware 87ers, the Sixers G League franchise, "rise up with different uniforms and not the ones they are wearing tonight. It hurts my eyes to look at them." It's the same day that the Twitter account for the Delaware 87ers posts a photo of Brian Colangelo at the game with the broadcast team. the only time that tweet that the Delaware 87ers have even mentioned Brian Colangelo. So there's a lot of weird stuff going on, and it's so strange that even in this super hyper social media invasive world that we live in, there's something that could be surprising to people. Yet here we are. And I know a lot of people, I myself even pointed out when I heard about this, the Kevin Durant issue where he had some fake accounts to go after some of his own haters, but this is just so much worse. You're going after your own players. Your own players. The guy you replaced and the guy who replaced you. It's petty, it's unprofessional, it's almost unbelievable, and yet somehow I'm not shocked at the same time. We'll get Brandon Robinson's thoughts here in just a little bit. Touch on, of course, Game 1 tonight, this NBA Finals in general with him. Brandon Robinson, Scoop B Radio, going to join us in just a little bit. We'll touch on a little bit of the Stanley Cup Final. What a couple of first games to start off with. Vegas put on a tremendous show, as they almost always do. A lot of fun. We'll get to Major League Baseball. Some of the other big news. The NBA Draft Combine has been completed. You've got players dropping out, players officially staking their claim to the NBA Draft as well. A number of other issues. And your listener questions, as always, it's coming up here in just a little bit. Don't forget to subscribe, rate, review, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, iHeartRadio, Spreaker.com, Stitcher.com, TuneIn Radio, and, of course, thephmedia.com. Back with Brandon Robinson, Scoop B Radio. You're on Press Row.
This is Sam Kirby, host of Cinema Stories here on Public House Media. Thanks for listening to the following broadcast on Public House Media. Once you're done with this episode, I hope you'll come check out my show, Cinema Stories, where we hang out and just talk movie and TV news and reviews, and it's awesome. A new show comes out every single Tuesday. Don't forget to subscribe on iTunes so you never miss an episode of Cinema Stories. Thanks again for checking out the following broadcast on Public House Media.
Want to be part of the show? Go to Facebook and search Press Row Podcast Public House Media, or find us on Twitter and Instagram at Press Row PHM. You can also email the program, pressrowphm@gmail.com. This is Press Row with Christian Heimel, a Public House Media podcast.
Here we go again. I thought what we had was over. Here we go again.
Just like the Isley brothers said, here we go again, round 4 with Cavaliers and Warriors NBA Finals. Christian Heimel here with you on Press Row, broadcast as part of the Public House Media Network. Big thanks to all of you who have been supporting us here now, as this actually marks our 1-year anniversary, and it's almost poetic that we get to bring in our first ever guest on Press Row back once again on the 1-year anniversary of the show beginning. Brandon Robinson, Scoop B Radio, joins us here. Brandon, again, I got to thank you for a year ago and helping getting this thing running, and for being so gracious with your time over the last 12 months and helping making this thing grow.
Well, first and foremost, first things first, as Biggie Smalls would say, congratulations. 52 episodes, consistency, hard work, preparation. That's dope. Congratulations on 1 year, man.
Thank you, my friend. And real quick, before we get into the NBA Finals, mentioned it in the first segment of the show, probably the weirdest story that we've seen, and it's hard to do that considering the social media age that we are in, but Brian Colangelo, the report from The Ringer, potentially at least, and none of this has been confirmed, is just very odd and weird, coincidental with these 5 Twitter accounts that have supposedly been linked to him. What do you make of all the news coming out of Philadelphia?
It's funny you mentioned that. I was actually texting with an NBA player. I won't say his name before we spoke, and he asked me what I thought about it, and I told him that I believe that this is you saw it on the player side, you saw it on the talent side with KD. It's kind of cool to see an executive kind of go through that too, because I feel like a lot of times people put pressure on players and people criticize players for what they do. Similarly to how players, you look at it like this. You look at players who make decisions on their legacy and where they want to play next, whether they take less money through free agency, and you can credit Kurt Flood in baseball for deciding your fate. But, the executives are not players, and so you have to create jobs for players to, or rather for executives to make money and to keep their family, fed and supported. So, there's a lot of things that executives do that they can be hide behind a tie or a suit and can do those things. But when you're a player and you're a brand, you're looked up to by millions and millions of people. The pressure is more on them. So that being said, if Mr. Colangelo is guilty, I think that he should be held to a standard, and I'll tell you why. You look at a guy like Jahlil Okafor, talented player coming out of high school, a guy who played well at Duke, and is damaged goods because his head is messed up. I felt that when the Sixers were going through their rebranding phase, when they won 20 games, and they, they were people, they had their nose up. I tell people, they steamed their broccoli so much it stunk, so they had their nose up in the air, and they just outcasted Jahlil Okafor. And so, Colangelo didn't necessarily draft him, and he was Sam Hinkie's guy, but you ruin his money and you ruin his stocks. And what goes up must come down. What don't come out in the wash that comes out in the rinse. And, I told this particular player I spoke to, I said, this is the executive version of essentially what the Golden State Warriors did to Mark Jackson, which I wrote about in my column at basketballsocietyonline.com. You can check it out. But, Mark Jackson, because of, maybe a couple missteps or arguments with ownership, they blackballed him in the NBA and spoken to many people about it through various things. And I feel like, 2018 is a year of truth. And I feel like, you're seeing certain people doing some things that weren't right with players and coaches and more. And it's coming to the forefront. And, don't want to monopolize the time because there's more important things to talk about, like the NBA Finals, rather than burner accounts. But I'm a little ticked that, people's names and their reputations and their money is being tampered with.
Well, and considering that he's going after not only Okafor, but he went after Nerlens Noel. He even went after Joel Embiid this season, at least these Twitter accounts did. If this is Brian Colangelo, is this something that should cost him his job?
Yes. You know why? Because there was information that was leaked that only insiders knew, like the failed physical with Okafor. And just, when you talk about Nerlens Noel, people that I speak with, they've said that just the Sixers and their search to become this elite team, kind of just walked all over him, and kind of didn't treat him like he was one of the better kids, if you will. And, I've always questioned some of the Sixers' moves, even going back to, I feel like the Michael Carter-Williams trade, while you got better and you got draft picks and more, I feel like that damaged him. And, of course, that was a Sam Hinkie move. But the Sixers, to me, in hiring Colangelo, it was nepotism at its finest because he's the son of, Jerry Colangelo. And people buy off of that last name. But, Jerry Colangelo has been in the league for a long time, and Jerry Colangelo, put together the Redeem team. And, Jerry Colangelo was there when, the Phoenix Suns and Charles Barkley and Kevin Johnson made a run. But, his son, had a successful run somewhat with the Toronto Raptors and, of course, was replaced. But, if this is true, I mean, I was seeing some reports that, obviously you can verify people's Twitter accounts by their phone numbers. And someone saying the last two digits was 75, and that was, Colangelo's last two digits. And, they're trying to figure out what's what. But, again, Kevin Durant saw, or rather brought to the forefront that, people are using burner Twitter accounts. But this is just vile and just tampering with people's names and their brands. And it brings it to the forefront also because of everything that has gone on with the presidential election in 2016 with now current U.S. President Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton, who was, running on the Democratic ticket. But, just fake news, Russia, digital stuff. And, people just have no tolerance for it because they realize that this is a thing. And NBA Twitter became a hashtag last night. It's always been a hashtag, but it got a little bit more personal because, you were dealing with people's medical issues, their personal lives, their livelihood. And Colangelo's quiet, and, I hope, just like in the case with Morgan Freeman, where there were some accusations made about him, he took a day and then you released a statement about it, and then it got quiet. Roseanne kind of helped him with what's going under the tunnel, but
yeah.
I think that this with with Brian Colangelo, this is something that is going to make the NBA look at a lot of things digitally, because the NBA has always been innovative in being ahead of the curve, both social justice-wise, bullying, social media, and more, and it's going to be interesting.
It just felt really petty to me. If this comes out to be Brian Colangelo, it seems way too petty for the president of an NBA franchise, especially one that was a great story here this year. Speaking with Brandon Robinson, Scoop B Radio, the NBA, of course, can't wait for the game to actually tip off here tonight, Game 1, Cavaliers-Warriors, year 4 in a row, Brandon, that we're here. Is this, just like we drew it up, right? Back in the summer, LeBron James, Kyrie Irving, and the super team in Golden State, they were going to re-up once again, but LeBron now with a huge trade deadline and a bunch of guys randomly put together on this roster, just like we drew it up, right?
Yeah, man, a lot has changed since we spoke a year ago. Kyrie Irving is a member of the Boston Celtics and may potentially be trade bait in the offseason. Isaiah Thomas has came and left, as had Derrick Rose and Dwayne Wade. I think that, those guys finally got the reunion they wanted that was supposed to be in Chicago back in 2010, but they were a lot older. And LeBron James is still as dominant, if not more dominant. A different scenario, LeBron had to claw, scratch, climb, jump. It's like Super Mario Brothers 1. He did everything. He just didn't have a mushroom. But I think that this matchup is special. And news coming out as early as Wednesday morning that Andre Iguodala will miss Game 1 for the Golden State Warriors. So as much as we talk about LeBron's dominant, both teams have endured Game 7s. I do think that the Cavaliers' leap was a lot longer a jump. So you may need the feather to fly like Super Mario Brothers 2 and Super Nintendo for LeBron, but at the same time, it's going to be a matchup, man. It's going to be a matchup.
Is this good for the? First time it's ever happened where last year, first time it ever happened where you had the same two teams competing 3 years in a row. And I was reading an article in Forbes last week where it's been over 20 million viewers each of the last 2 years in the NBA Finals. I know people are upset that it's a predictability aspect, but how is this bad for the NBA to have these two teams competing for another title?
We could have said the same thing years ago when the Celtics and the Lakers kept meeting. No, they didn't meet 4 times in a row, but throughout the course of their trajectory in the 70s and the 80s, they often met and rekindled that fuel, or rekindled that matchup in 2008. When Kevin Garnett and Paul Pierce-led Celtics faced Kobe Bryant and the Los Angeles Lakers. But a lot has changed because we have a lot of time on our hands and we have Twitter. I think that is the equalizer. What'd you say?
Yeah, no, I completely agree with you. The social media aspect of it has to be one of the reasons why there's so much backlash against this.
For sure. And I think that when teams on their respective conferences are building their teams through free agency and more, they're building them to, face whatever team LeBron is on in the Golden State Warriors. When you walk into any high school gym, Steph Curry and the Warriors have made it acceptable to be on a fast break and pull up for 3 and make it. But I think it's done within a fundamental system, because when you look at the Golden State Warriors, they do play defense. The athletic big that is JaVale McGee roams the paint, but can also pull up from 3. And I also think that Steph Curry and Klay Thompson, being second-generation ball players that are playing within a Steve Kerr system that is a Phil Jackson, Greg Popovich hybrid under head coach Steve Kerr, but definitely is an intrigue to a Cavaliers team where LeBron scores most of the points, and I think the second leading scorer is Kevin Love and or Kyle Korver, who have been the 2 most consistent players on the Cavaliers side this season. And LeBron still found a way to defend the throne, that is the Cleveland Cavaliers. And what's interesting in the 4 years that these two teams have played is the evolution. So you look at 2015, 2015, you had a Cavs team who was expected to just beat the Golden State Warriors, and an injury to Kyrie Irving changed the whole trajectory. But you made that trading deadline deal where you got Iman Shumpert, you got J.R. Smith, but those guys didn't necessarily show up. Shumpert's shot wasn't falling. You saw Tristan Thompson emerge as the big that everybody thought he would be. This was pre-Kardashian, of course, and LeBron single-handedly was playing in 2015, in my opinion, how he was playing in the playoffs this year, because the Cavs didn't deserve to beat the Indiana Pacers, but they found a way to win. The Toronto Raptors, hey, Christian, we probably could have beat the Toronto Raptors with LeBron. But at the same time, I think that this is a carryover. This year 4 is significant. This is the senior year of college. Is LeBron going, and the Cavaliers, are they going to win it? You know, he beat the Boston Celtics. He and the Cavs beat the Boston Celtics without Kyrie Irving and without Gordon Hayward. He did it without Kyrie Irving. You know, he's the alpha male that stayed. In year 4, you tie up the matchup with the Warriors if you beat them in the finals. This is a monumental NBA Finals matchup, and they got to win it. They got to win it. What they say in New York Lotto, you got to be in it to win it. LeBron got to be in it.
How much does this performance in the playoffs, regardless of if he wins a title or not, this is his 8th straight trip to the finals, 8th straight. How much with this group that he's been with to go through a war in the first round against Indiana, a war against the Celtics, and to win Game 7 on the road, how much does this give any help to the argument of whether or not he can be considered the greatest of all time?
I can figure those arguments because I think every generation did it. We talked about Twitter. I'm going to directly answer your question, but I want to set up the alley before I dunk it. So last year on Scoop B Radio, which you guys can subscribe to on Google Play, TuneIn App, Stitcher, Apple Podcasts, or visit scoopbradio.com. I talked to Dr. J. Julius Irving, and he said to me, I asked him about just comparing errors and how, you know, people compare Michael to LeBron, and he said to me, you know, when I played, I felt as though I had to live up to an expectation because people were putting me and Connie Hawkins in the same kind of category or comparison, you know, and he said it's not up for the players to decide. It's not for the players to prove to the fans that this is what it is. You just got to go out and produce and compete. So to directly answer your question, I think a lot of times people put Michael Jordan on this pedestal because he won 6 championships and never lost. And I often think that people try to make the Michael and LeBron comparison because they're both the alpha male. But LeBron is more magic than he is Michael. Yeah. LeBron proved that to you in the conference finals when he pulled the magic out his hat like Magic did when Kareem Abdul-Jabbar was out.
Yep. No,
you know,
I completely agree.
And I think that more than anything, when Michael played, John Stockton and Jeff Hornacek and Karl Malone couldn't check Michael. Clyde Drexler couldn't check Michael. And you play, and in the first finals, you had a Magic Johnson that was old and get ready to retire anyway. And Vlade Divac isn't checking Michael. Come on now. So, I mean, to be honest with you, the best competition, in my opinion, that Michael Jordan had when he played was the Seattle Supersonics with Gary Payton and Sean Kemp. And they still weren't checking Michael and Scottie and Rodman. So LeBron is playing against the Warriors, who was considered the Bulls of their era. Do you realize the significance of Kevin Durant leaving Oklahoma City, going to Golden State? That's like Larry Bird leaving Boston in his prime and going to the Lakers and playing with Magic.
Yeah.
That doesn't happen.
No, it doesn't. I mean, it's just one of those things that, and you're right, the Twitter comparison, you're completely right. I mean, we're going to do that. We're going to have those hot takes. I mean, I will forever debunk anybody who tries to tell me Jordan's better than LeBron just because of 6 championships, because Bill Russell went to, 12 straight finals and won 11 of them?
Yep.
So, I mean, if we're gonna go championships, Bill Russell is the end all be all right then and there. Speaking with Brandon Robinson, Scoop B Radio here on Press Row. As we get to this actual matchup here, the Cavs open up as the biggest underdog since 2001. How do you see this series playing out, and where would you consider it from an upset standpoint if the Cavaliers do come away with another title?
I think that, first of all, to answer your second question first, if the Cavs win this title, this is better than 2016.
Okay.
Because the Cavs were supposed to win in 2015, and they made up for it in 2016. If the Cavs win it this year, they did it without Kyrie Irving. They did it when David Griffin, their GM, left, and Kobe Altman came in, a fish fresh out of water, made a 3-team deal with the Lakers, the Jazz, and sent Dwayne Wade on packing a year earlier than most people thought he was going to come. This is special because, number one, in hip-hop, there's a guy named the Drama King. On Hot 97 locally, there's a drop that says the Drama King is in the building. And LeBron is a Drama King. Don't get me wrong. Winning in the playoff was everything that the flu game was, and Michael hitting the double nickel in Madison Square Garden, and him switching his number back to 23 from 45. 10 to 15 years from now, we'll be talking about those stories like it was just yesterday. And that being said, I think that the Cavs beating the Warriors just has so many storylines. But I think that the Cavs beating the Warriors, if that's to happen, solidifies that LeBron James is able to adapt to anybody who plays with him. And to be honest with you, when he first came into the league, I said that LeBron was a magnet and could attract anybody to play with him the same way Jason Kidd could. I use this analogy all the time. Jason Kidd rolled the basketball half court to Lucius Harris for a lay-in. If that's not a blockbuster attraction to watch, I don't know what is. LeBron is not just a scorer; he's a team player. But he got a bunch of guys who, nobody else other than Kevin Love is an all-star. But at the same time, Kyle Korver, coming from Philadelphia years ago, playing with Allen Iverson, playing with the Utah Jazz and Atlanta Hawks for years, coming and being a shooter that LeBron often needs. Jeff Green, once having heart surgery, now being the second tier to LeBron in Game 7 the other night. And to be honest with you, the key for the Cavs to do well is going to come down to the point guard play. George Hill has to score. I gave this stat last week. If George Hill in the conference finals against the Boston Celtics, when George Hill scores 5 points or more, the Cavs win. Game 7, I believe he scored 20. Or no, it was Game 6 he scored 20. George Hill is everything that Darren Williams was supposed to be last year. But it's going to come down to team. Because when LeBron is not hot,
right.
Man's not hot, what you going to do? Larry Nance Jr. came up big in Game 6. But, it's also going to come down to what Kevin Love does.
Right.
I do think that the Warriors' absence of Andre Iguodala, both on the offensive and the defensive end, is going to be very interesting because that guy is truly a glue guy, and he can do it in a multitude of ways. I like the fact that Klay Thompson, in Game 6 against the Houston Rockets, my man played uncomfortably comfortable, and he came up big for them. It's going to come down to really, who wants it more and who plays the hardest. I know that sounds simplistic, but it's the truth.
Who do you got then in the series?
Well, I got it wrong last year, so I might as well get it right this year. I still have the Cavs in 6.
Okay, I like it. Real quick before we let you go, you joined us on another podcast a couple weeks ago, the Cheap Seats here on Public House Media, and we asked you about the future of LeBron James, and you were probably the only person I've heard of saying that the Miami Heat is an option. With this run to the finals and with this the number 8 pick in the draft now for the Cavaliers, is there anything Cleveland can do that keeps him over the summer short of winning a title?
They got to win. I think this offseason will be interesting. I'm going to tell you what's going to be interesting. It's interesting that the day before the NBA Finals, that Sixers story comes out because that's going to affect free agency if they keep Colangelo, and that story is true. That being said, I think that LeBron will make all decisions once the finals are over. If the Cavs win, they have a greater chance of him staying. But I also think that, unfortunately, any LeBron James-led team, 2 to 3 years, they run down, and you've got to retool. You saw it in Miami. You saw it in Cleveland the first go-around, and you're seeing it in Cleveland now. I think that Philly is optional because they have a young team. Miami is optional because they have a young team. They have the cap space. And I also think he's familiar with Miami. But I also do think he's familiar with the Houston Rockets. And the Houston Rockets have assets, and they have players. And I think that the Eastern Conference is going to get harder with a healthy Kyrie Irving, Terry Rozier, Jason Tatum, and more. Philadelphia, Boston are more competitive. And in the Western Conference, LeBron doesn't have to see the Golden State Warriors in the NBA Finals. He'd have to see them at the conference finals at the latest. So while I think Miami is still a team you shouldn't sleep on, Houston is up there. And it depends on what kind of splashes they can make in free agency or trades in the offseason for Cleveland. But it's going to come down to whether or not Cleveland wins, and then they'll take it from there. But I think LeBron's decision is also going to come based upon, and people I've spoken to, based upon what Kawhi Leonard does first.
Going to be another fun summer here. Brandon Robinson, Scoop B Radio. Check him out, scoopbradio.com. We appreciate the time. As always, brother, enjoy the finals. Thank you.
My man, thank you for the opportunity.
Brandon Robinson, Scoop B Radio, joining us here on Press Row. We'll get into the NBA Finals and a whole lot more when we return. This is Press Row on the Public House Media Network.
This is Ryan Pierce, host of Completely Serious here on Public House Media. Thanks for listening to the following broadcast on Public House Media. Once you're done with this episode, I hope you'll come check out my show, Completely Serious, where we talk about sports and have fun with great guests. Don't forget to subscribe on iTunes so you'll never miss an episode of Completely Serious. Thanks again for checking out the following broadcast on Public House Media.
Listen to every episode and get the latest shows sent right to you. Subscribe to Press Row on iTunes, Google Play, iHeartRadio, Spreaker.com, and Stitcher.com. Or visit us online at www.thephmedia.com. This is Press Row with Christian Heimel, a Public House Media podcast.
Press Row, Chris Heimel here with you, broadcasting as part of the Public House Media Network. Don't forget to find the show on social media, Twitter and Instagram handle at PressRowPHM. You can email the show, PressRowPHM@gmail.com, or you can find us on Facebook, Press Row by Public House Media. Always appreciate you guys' support there, as well as subscribing on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, iHeartRadio, Spreaker.com, Stitcher.com, TuneIn Radio, and, of course, thephmedia.com, where you can get some awesome Press Row gear, help support the show. Big thanks to Brandon Robinson, Scoop B Radio. It was really fun. I didn't even realize until he picked up the phone that it's been a year since we've been doing this, and we really appreciate you guys. And Brandon was our first guest, was so kind enough to give us some time, and been a big supporter of the show, so we appreciate his time there and his insight. And listen, I mean, we could easily get into these Jordan, LeBron debates forever. We could always talk about this, but whether you agree with it or not, at some point in the next 10, 15 years, you're going to look back and wish you had appreciated what LeBron James has done. And this postseason, more than anything else, has been incredible for him. It's been a completely different team throughout the entire year. He's rarely played. He's played less than half the season with the same guys. I mean, it's incredible to think that throughout the entire year, whether it be injuries, trades, Dwayne Wade getting released, so much stuff that changed for LeBron. I mean, he played every single game, played almost every minute of the playoffs. He's just been absolutely phenomenal. That being said, I mean, this Warriors team is really, really stacked. I think the interesting part is, of course, Andre Iguodala being out for tonight's Game 1. The question whether or not Kevin Love will be available is a big part here. I think what's going to be the deciding factor, and this is really, really important to note here, a guy like Draymond Green is so important to this team. And I know Brandon was talking about Klay Thompson and how how much of a presence he can be when he scores. And when he scores, he's incredible. When he steps out and is that guy. But Draymond Green can defend all 5 positions. He can rebound. He can pass. He can score. He has that 3-point range. Draymond Green is impressive. And if he holds down LeBron James a little bit defensively, or if he has a strong offensive game, and the other part is he's a physical player. I mean, you saw what he did with James Harden. Little couple shoves there. He's not afraid to get into it. We've seen it before in the finals with Draymond Green. He is, I think, one of the most influential players in this NBA Finals, and I think it'll be interesting to see just how much of an impact he has. I think that Draymond will eventually be one of the reasons he won't win MVP. Make no mistake about that. He won't win MVP, nor should he, in the finals, but he will be a key reason why this Golden State team wins. I don't think Cleveland upsets. I think LeBron gets at least 1 at home. I still think it's Warriors in 5, maybe 6. If it goes 7 games, that'd be awesome. This has been, like I said in the first segment, one of the more fun NBA postseasons I've watched in a very, very long time, just with how competitive it was in the Eastern Conference, which has always been considered a very poor conference, comparatively speaking, to the Western Conference. So, going to be a lot of fun tonight, Game 1. It's a little annoying, in my opinion, that Game 1 is tonight and Game 2 is on Sunday as opposed to on Saturday when it normally would be. But this is, as we mentioned, they opened up as a very big underdog, the Cavaliers, 12-point dogs, but this is pretty impressive to watch. When you look at, again, how LeBron James has basically carried this Cavaliers team, when you look at how the Warriors, even without Andre Iguodala for a couple games, without Steph Curry for a couple of games, they have found ways to be dominant. Klay Thompson has had great games. Kevin Durant has been unbelievable. Playoff Kevin is something really, really impressive. So this will be a lot of fun to watch. It will be exciting. I know that for some of you, you don't like the predictability of it, but again, as the numbers have shown, you're still watching. Over 20 million people have watched the NBA Finals the last 2 years. When it's been a repeat of Cavaliers and Warriors. So I can't say I'm upset about it. I can't. I mean, as a Celtics fan growing up and wishing that the Celtics had won Game 7, yeah, I would have loved to have seen this Boston team playing against one of these teams. I would have liked to have seen Houston, but ultimately this is what it should be, the best 2 teams competing for the championship. And you had that. You had the 4 best teams in the NBA there at the end in Golden State, Houston, Cleveland, and Boston. So this is how it's supposed to pan out. I don't know why people are upset about it. Sit back and enjoy greatness. I understand that you're a little maybe tired of it, but were you tired of Jordan when he went to 4 straight? Were you tired of Kobe when he went to all of those in a row? Were you tired of Tim Duncan and the Spurs? Dirk Nowitzki always being there with the Dallas Mavericks. I know they may not be the same comparison. They may not be the same hatred level on social media, but understand something, that you are watching what is really, really exciting and really entertaining in basketball. So I hope you at least at some point can enjoy it here over the next couple of days. Get to a couple of other headlines in the NBA. Of course, thought it was great to see Orlando's Steve Clifford getting to be the head coach of the Orlando Magic as he was introduced on Wednesday, coaching the Charlotte Hornets the last 5 years. Former assistant with Orlando, the last one, of course, when he was there. With their last playoff run, so good for them. It's going to be a difficult one. A little bit of rebuild there for Orlando, but they've got some really exciting players with Jonathan Isaac and of course Aaron Gordon. So good on Steve Clifford. Good on them for bringing him back to be able to have him there. Charlotte making the playoffs twice when Clifford was the head coach. Brett Brown getting an extension in Philadelphia, which just further adds to how strange that Brian Colangelo story is, and who knows exactly how it all plays out. But I don't know if Brett Brown deserved an extension. I thought he was outcoached thoroughly by Brad Stevens in that in that series. I thought that he made some really bad decisions or non-decisions, but either way, it's been an interesting week for the city of Philadelphia and for their basketball team, that is for sure. But, Brett Brown got an extension, Steve Clifford, the new head coach of the Orlando Magic, and we'll see exactly how it all pans out. But good on them, and hopefully, there's still couple of coaching positions left available. We'll see exactly what ends up happening in the world of the NBA. I know that the Detroit Pistons and the Toronto Raptors still have openings, so we'll see what happens there. But could be interesting. Add to the interesting offseason. I thought that was one of the more interesting parts of our conversation with Brandon Robinson of Scoop B Radio is that LeBron's decision would factor in some people he's talked to where Kawhi Leonard goes and what Kawhi Leonard does. So all eyes apparently on Kawhi Leonard before they go on to LeBron James. And Kevin Durant has said he's going to opt out just to re-sign and restructure his deal with Golden State, but things can always change. So the NBA has become a 12-month, a year-round sport that we always focus in on, and this season I can't say I'm upset about that. I used to be very jaded about how much the NBA got coverage, especially over certain sports like hockey, which we'll get to here in our next segment after the break, and Major League Baseball in the middle of the winter. But it's been a lot of fun watching this NBA season, and it's coming to a head tonight with Game 1 of the NBA Finals, Cavaliers-Warriors for the 4th straight season. Hope you guys get a chance to actually sit and enjoy it. When we return, NHL playoffs, your listener questions as well. It's all coming up. You're on Press Row. I'm Christian Eimel here on the Public House Media Network.
Want to be part of the show? Go to Facebook and search Press Row Podcast Public House Media. Or find us on Twitter and Instagram at Press Row PHM. You can also email the program, pressrowphm@gmail.com.
This is Daniel Poppy, host of How to Write Good here on Public House Media. I just want to thank you for listening to the following broadcast brought to you by Public House Media. Once you're done with this episode, I hope that you'll come check out my show, How to Write Good, the writing show that is not about writing. A new show of How to Write Good comes out every Wednesday, so don't forget to subscribe on iTunes so you never miss an episode of How to Write Good. Again, thanks for checking out the following broadcast on Public House Media.
Listen to every episode and get the latest shows sent right to you. Subscribe to Press Row on iTunes, Google Play, iHeartRadio, Spreaker.com, and Stitcher.com. Or visit us online at www.thephmedia.com. This is Press Row with Christian Heimel, a Public House Media podcast.
I got the magic in me. Every time I touch that track, it turns into gold. Everybody knows I got the
Welcome back on
magic
Press Row. Chris
in
Heimel here with you. Last segment on this May 31st, 2018, our 52nd show. It's been 1 year since we started this fun journey with all of you guys, and we certainly appreciate all the support you've given us, whether it be through social media, through buying some awesome gear, from Press Row on thephmedia.com, subscribing, rating, reviewing, sharing with all of your friends and family, which you can do so, by the way, on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, iHeartRadio, Spreaker.com, Stitcher.com, TuneIn Radio, and, of course, you can do it as well on thephmedia.com. Been fun to do this for the last year, and as always, your guys' input is appreciated on social media. You can find us on Twitter and Instagram at PressRowPHM. You can email the show, PressRowPHM@gmail.com. Don't forget to find us on Facebook, Press Row Podcast by Public House Media as well. We'll get to your listener questions here right now as we get set to close up shop in just a little bit. Derek in Alabama, do you agree with Gus Malzahn that the new headset rule will hurt college football? The Auburn head coach said it over the week that the rule limiting the number of people on headsets during games is, quote, a joke. There's no doubt about it. I think it's got the ability to hurt our game. It's a really big deal. Look, I don't understand this. I don't agree with him at all because I feel like personally 20 people with a headset is too many people making decisions, too many people. There is such a thing as too many chefs in the kitchen. 15 coaches allowed to have headsets. I understand his anger that there are bigger issues to deal with. He says, I don't know who's driving all of this stuff, but to me it's kind of like mouse manure when you're up to your ears in elephant doo-doo. First off, great analogy. That's hilarious. But I understand there's You want a lot of people involved. We've got a lot of people that are not football coaches making decisions for football. I think if we had more football coaches involved in the decision, we'd be making it would be better for our game. Listen, I don't think it will impact what a coach normally does. The coach ultimately is the end-all, be-all. The offensive coordinator or defensive coordinator of the plays. Truthfully, there are, 6 guys that should have headsets? Your coordinator, maybe a position coach or 2 in there, and the head coach, obviously. It makes no sense to me why we need so many people with headsets. I always wondered this to begin with. Why do you need so many of them? So I don't agree with Gus Malzahn. I don't think it hurts the game at all. I think if you really need more than 20 people in your ear making a decision, you don't know what you're doing, or you don't know if you're making the right decision. So I think Gus Malzahn is making a mountain out of a molehill, even though I agree with him in that it's there are bigger issues to worry about, but I don't agree with him in the fact that it's bad for the game or it'll hurt the quality of the game. It most certainly will not. So, and it won't even be an issue talked about. The only reason there's something that Gus Malzahn likes to have 20-plus headsets, and he's upset about it, so he's going to make some noise about it. Joseph in Florida, your thoughts on Carlos Gomez saying players are targeted for MLB's random drug testing. So this one was interesting. The Rays outfielder said that there's nothing random about Major League Baseball's drug policy and their drug testing. He was tested for what he believes is the sixth or 7th time in the first 9 weeks of the season. On Tuesday, was tested 3 days after coming back from the disabled list. He's saying, quote, "I have the greatest luck on my team because they test me more than everyone else. I've arrived now 3 days after coming from the disabled list, and they're already testing me again." On the surface, this looks weird. This looks like he's just sour grapes for Carlos Gomez. But when you look at it a little bit closer, he's been outspoken about this more than anything, saying that the day after Robinson Cano was suspended, the league targets older players and Latino players for testing. Again, kind of seems like sour grapes. However, Robinson Cano is one of 3 major leaguers suspended for violating the MLB drug policy: Wellington Castillo and Jorge Polanco. All 3 of them are from the Dominican Republic. Carlos Gomez is from the Dominican Republic. He's never tested positive in his 12 years in the major leagues, but it kind of raises a red flag. I don't necessarily believe, at least yet, that the MLB targets certain players for drug testing. But when you think about it like that, much in the way with the Brian Colangelo story that we started off the show with, it's almost too coincidental to be just a coincidence that Carlos Gomez and the 3 players who've been suspended for 80 games this year, at least, are all Dominican. So it's really hard for me to kind of turn away from, but at the same time, it's hard for me to really kind of make a comment about it and to really kind of say one way or the other, because I don't know. MLB says they're random. I'm going to believe them until proven otherwise. But that's just how I think it is at the moment. We'll see exactly how it all goes there. But it is unfortunate that a certain player gets tested that many times in such a short amount of time. To be tested almost once a week for the start of the season is a little ridiculous. That kind of seems like targeting more than anything else. And you would think that after a while, if a player does test positive for multiple tests in such a short amount of time, they no longer become part of that random selection process. But MLB has its processes for a reason, and it's definitely something to keep an eye on at least. Michael in New York here, now that all players have had to declare or withdraw their name from the NBA draft, who is the most intriguing prospect to you coming out of college? There's a lot of them, actually. I mean, Luka Doncic and DeAndre Ayton at the top is very interesting. Jaren Jackson Jr., I think, is fun to talk about. Dante DiVincenzo deciding to come out, as well as Amari Spellman. I mean, the Nova Wildcats lost 4 players in this draft. I mean, that's scary to think of. But I think the one that's really interesting to me is Brian Bowen. His story is fascinating to me. Brian Bowen, for those of you who do not remember, he was the player at the center of all this Louisville stuff, all these issues. He had originally signed with Louisville out of high school, was at the school for the first semester during all these FBI allegations that his dad took money from Adidas, then transferred to South Carolina, hoping to gain eligibility after missing everything. The NCAA Student Reinstatement Committee, though, said he would have to sit out all of next season as well. and that's, quote, at a minimum. That wasn't even a ruling, so he could face more, according to one source. But it's really strange to me that this guy, he's going to go into the draft. He kind of has to, because he doesn't want to sit out another year. But a lot of people are saying he's a late first round or late second round pick. He might not even get drafted, which is really, really interesting that this kid, who is so highly recruited, as Rick Pitino called it, as a miracle or whatever, it's really strange to see that he could all of a sudden just not go drafted. And I understand we haven't seen him play. I get it. But you know what? We haven't really seen Michael Porter play at all. And he's still a top 15 draft pick. Colin Sexton, I don't believe, is that talented. Dante DiVincenzo, he had to go into the draft because his stock would never be higher than it currently is after what he did in the Final Four. But Brian Bowen and his whole career is just fascinating to me. And this is interesting. So we'll see exactly what happens when the NBA draft comes on in a couple of weeks, and of course we'll have it covered for you here on Press Row. Last thing I want to get to here today, and of course we always appreciate your guys' questions. Don't forget to subscribe, rate, review Apple Podcasts, Google Play, iHeartRadio, Spreaker.com, Stitcher.com, and of course thephmedia.com as well. And find us on social media, Twitter and Instagram at PressRowPHM. Email the show, PressRowPHM@gmail.com, or Facebook, Press Row by Public House Media. It was interesting to see a lot of people upset about the NHL Stanley Cup Final being Washington and Vegas, mainly because of Vegas and not wanting to have a team in its first expansion. You're saying it's bad for hockey. I firmly 100% disagree. This is the best possible thing that could have happened for Vegas. And for the NHL, because in that city, such a popular destination, which prior to 2 weeks ago was the only place where you could really go and gamble on sports and bet on sports. And we always talk about, what does Vegas have to say about this matchup? It was at one point the boxing capital of the world. Still, for some people, it is the boxing capital of the world. The MGM Grand. If you're going to have the G League there, if you're going to have an NFL team there a couple of years from now, possibly an actual NBA franchise, in that city, when there's so much other stuff to do and it's a tourist destination, you need the team to be good. You need that to happen. And this is the best possible thing that could have happened. And Game 1, by the way, the opening ceremonies, Vegas brought out all the stops, and it was perfect. I had chills listening to Michael Buffer do the starting lineups for the Stanley Cup. So this is probably the best thing that could happen. I don't know if it's better for them to win or lose, but for them to be this good is the best thing that the NHL could have ever had happen. And there's no debating that, because you need this team to be good for the fans to stick around, for Vegas to be an even bigger destination, and for the hockey market to grow. Because last 2 years, Nashville and Vegas, two places that are not big hockey markets, have been there competing for a title. It's the best possible thing for the NHL, and they need to embrace it, and so do its fans. Big thanks to Brandon Robinson, Scoop B Radio, for joining us here on the program this week. We appreciate your guys' support as well. Here's to many more years, huh? It's been a lot of fun doing it for 1 full year now, and we look forward to doing it for a heck of a lot longer. Don't forget to subscribe, rate, review, share us with your friends and family. Apple Podcasts, Google Play, iHeartRadio, Spreaker.com, and of course, thephmedia.com. Until next week, I'm Christian Heimel. I'll see you on Press Row.